So, a new car. In principle, there is not much work here. The car has a problem with fire mising, and this is a misfire in one of the cylinders. They asked me to measure the compression, well, and see what's going on at all. So, it appears here is my device for measuring compression. In principle, it is very convenient that it is in electronic form and that it records readings. She showed 4 and 7 pi CAI. In particular, I'm checking this cylinder here. But in general, the compression is small, and I have a video camera like this, which makes it possible to look at 180 degrees. So what did this video camera show? In principle, I will attach the video that I shot on this camera. You will see everything. In a nutshell, there are a lot of blows to the piston, scratches on the sleeve itself, and all this happened because one of the valves crumbled. A piece fell off from the valve. It beat the piston. Well, it turns out there is a hole in the valve, and therefore, there is no compression. What else is interesting about this car? Well, not only this car, but it's the first time I've seen this in Canada. But this car turns out not to have 5 seats, as usual, but a little more. Why? Because there are 2 seats in front. It turns out there are 3 seats, and there is an opportunity to put 3 more people in the back. It's almost in the trunk. Yes, it's like this in the trunk. Well, for a large family, it's very cool, and even here it often turns out to be 8 places. 8 seats in the car. That's it. By the way, I found out in passing what happened to this old engine. I'm getting lucky on the valves today. We look. Oops. The valve broke off and rested against the piston. I think that's where the engine jammed, because the piston just stopped. In general, that's it. So, well, now, with the help of this apparatus, we are pumping out the liquid of the air conditioning system. Here, but I ran into another problem. The fact is that when I started to unscrew the 4 bolts that are attached here, roughly speaking, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they roughly hold this one. I do not know what it is called again in English, in Russian. Well, in general. To unscrew them, you need to turn the crankshaft. And in one place, I can't unscrew 1 bolt because it doesn't turn. And most likely the following happened. That is, the valve is stuck between the head and the cylinder, as we have seen. And there was nowhere to go for energy. Apparently, the connecting rod is bent. In order for me to unscrew the last bolt now, I will probably have to remove the pallet and unscrew the connecting rod. But in any case, we have to stop the pallet, because this pallet is good. The pallet on that engine is bad, it's crumpled. So you have to do it while the engine is on the car. I thought I was going to do it when I took it off. In general, not everything turned out to be so easy. The first is the pallet itself. This is the first time I've come across this, that it was glued. Well, yes, pallets can be glued very tightly, but this one didn't want to go at all. That is, I even damaged it a little. We will decide, maybe we will have to order a new one. That's the first thing. The second thing inside is an additional such block. Well, the block. This turns out to be an oil pump with balancers. That is, roughly speaking, the crankshaft here is lightweight, and in order to avoid vibrations, some motors use balancers. The first balancers I saw in my life were on Mitsubishi, but it was an old Mitsubishi 4D65, 4D55 engine. I don't remember exactly. Here, but what's the point? I turn the crankshaft and see that the connecting rods are in good condition in principle. That is, they are not bent. So what does it mean? This means that something is still holding on top. This is probably some kind of problem with the camshaft. That is, apparently, the rocker broke or something. Well, in general, it does not rotate 180 degrees. As a result, I have already spat and unscrewed this nut with the help of these keys. Here. By the way, sometimes it helps very well. Well, all this is unscrewed. The pallet will go to another motor. It turns out that I have already disconnected this motor here. It remains to unscrew it and get it out. Let's see how it goes, how it all goes. In general, I planned to get it together with the gearbox at first, but then I noticed that there is, as it were, a place here. But there is not much of it. But nevertheless, there is a place to move the engine from the box. I'm still probably going to try to disconnect this engine separately tomorrow, so that the box stays there, the engine is separate. If something does not work out, then I will decide something else. So the day has come to an end. We will slowly gather in general what is the conclusion. Yes, you can get the engine separately, leave the box there, leave the distributor there, but it just comes out in the butt. Such a lapping, well, just lapping. That is, a millimeter or two would have been less space. I would not have got the engine already. I'll probably bet. I don't know, we'll see. Maybe we'll have to get the box out after all and already install it here. It's harder to set than to shoot, so okay, let's see. But on the whole, I got the engine, now we're going to take it, and now I'm going to take it aside, and that's it. An old engine on the ground. It's without a pallet, so I put it on a wooden pallet. The new engine is here. Before installing, I want to clean up these places. I'm going to clean it with this kind of thing, but with a nozzle. It's like a soft nozzle. Yes, it's like plastic. But it cleans aluminum very cool. I'll show you the result. So, well, here's the result. The seats have been cleaned. I don't know. Well, it's completely different, right? And all this takes about 2 to 5 minutes there. I've already blown it. Here. Interestingly, when you transfer these engines to Mitsubishi, it turns out that they have easily located the wiring, that is, You turned it off, and it remained in the car. On other engines, it happens that you turn off the engine, the wiring remains on the engine, and you have to transfer from one engine to another engine. It turns out that we throw this wiring, even if it looks the same, to be sure that everything will somehow work. Because sometimes the pinout is different, and then there may just be problems that we want to avoid. Additionally, I checked that everything that was on the old engine was on the new engine. That is, which tubes were missing, which were delivered. That is, it now corresponds to what I got, except for this wiring here. That is, the old engine without this wiring. The wiring remained on the body. I'm not unscrewing it now, because this bolt seems to be holding this ear, for which, as it were, I will lift it. I don't want to loosen it, then tighten it and then insert this wiring here again. This is already in place. I'll just connect it to the wiring dock that stands on the body, and everything will be fine on this. Yes, I also wanted to say that it is very important to check two things before installing the gearbox engine. The first thing is the guides, so that they are here as on the old engine. Here are two batteries on the old engine, because sometimes they stay on the box or get lost somewhere in any case. That is, so that there are no problems when you have installed the engine, but it does not go there, because there is already a bushing there, or vice versa. In other words, it is necessarily checked. This is the first moment. And the second point, well, I'm not going to check it here. It's standing normally, and the hydraulic transformer, when you get it, it's kind of a little difficult to put it in place. That is, it needs to be rotated there, and it turns out that it goes through three stages, as it were. That is, one, the second, and the third. And it is necessary to be sure that it stands until the very end, because again, if it is extended by one step, then when you put the engine on, you can damage something when you tighten it. That is, it must be in its place, and this is very important when installing the engine already to the transmission. Well, the engine is in its regular place. Of course, we played a little. They helped me here. One person stood on the crane lowered, raised, I directed, another person also prompted, stood also helped. But the engine is already in place. Summing up, in general, there is certainly not enough space here to shoot it. But what's the point? What if we remove everything from the box in addition, disconnect all these blocks, hoses and everything else, semi-axles? In other words, it takes a lot of time, and in principle, I have already done similar work. I was shooting on a kind of normal car fully assembled, the engine together with the box, and when you put it back, you also need to play there. There too, you need to play around. There is also no place there. That is, in principle, that's it. The truth is you don't have to do so much work, disconnect the box, and so on. So I think this option is quite workable. The engine on the Mitsubishi RVR can be disconnected separately, or on similar machines, can be disconnected separately. That's how it is. We will continue to collect. This is all that remains here. It remains to change the pallet, put the intake manifold, and slowly assemble everything. Let's digress from the topic a little more. We have an office right next to us that does tuning for crayfish like this. But not only such. We don't even know what it was, do we? To the temple. Well, it became a bear. Bear. That's how it was outlined outside it. The rollers were put up. The suspension was lifted. There's a car here. Well, I don't know. It's more than 2 meters high. More than 2 meters to lift the car. That is, such a bridge, such a walker. The rear axle is also raised. Chains, grizzly everywhere. Here is such an interesting truck. How do you like it? Handsome or ugly? There was a little free time. It became interesting. What is holding the crankshaft? That is, it rotates, but does not make a full circle. That is, roughly speaking, it stops in one place. If I rotate it back, it goes back to the same place, and also gets stuck. And just as it gets stuck in that place, it got stuck in that place where it was necessary to unscrew the bolt. So there was a difficulty. So let's see what's going on here. And the following happens. If you pay attention to the hydraulic compensators, the camshaft does not seem to be pressing on them now, but they turn out to be depressed. That is, again, we look at this cylinder. We look at this cylinder. There it turns out the valve is in the open state. They are in an open state, although the camshaft, it turns out, is on them. There is no pressure on them. This means that, after all, I think this engine had oil starvation, and it turns out all the hydraulic compensators, well, not all, but some part of the hydraulic compensators just got stuck in them in their seats, because they are not alone here. Here we look at this cylinder. The same thing is this cylinder, but this cylinder is pressed. This one is almost pressed, but also, well, not exactly. That is, it must be rotated again to determine. That is, if you think that it's like the valve holds the piston and rests against the head, then it turns out I pushed it away, it moved. This fragment of the valve. That is, he didn't hold it. Well, Mitsubishi is getting a look. The radiator is supplied, the pallet is supplied, the oil is filled. Flooded. No, it's not flooded yet, but now the leak-proofness of the cooling system is being checked. I use this device that I bought. Here it turns out the principle of operation, of what it means. There is a pressure regulator here. High pressure is applied to the inlet. You set how many atmospheres you need, and it's all left to check how much. As far as the system is sealed, that is, it looks there for 15 minutes, if there are leaks or not. After that, we will already pour the cooling liquid. In principle, I bought this device in addition to this set. This is a set that allows me, it turns out, to check the system for tightness. Here comes the pump, which I no longer use. That is, I was very lazy to pump it somehow in general. And this set additionally allows you to pour coolant into the system with the help of a vacuum.
И этот набор еще дополнительно позволяет при помощи вакуума залить охлаждающую жидкость в систему.
I'll try to show you. The only thing is that now we have repairs going on in our workshop, and everything is so messy, so my tool is lying on the ground. So sometimes there is noise behind the scenes. For example, welding is happening there now, so sorry for that. It will be a little easier with this case later.
Шум за кадром, например, сейчас там происходит сварка. Так что извините за это, будет немного чуть попозже полегче с этим делом.
In general, how the vacuum system works. One end is connected. It turns out I have a bucket here that I poured Mitsubishi coolant into. The second end is connected to the radiator.
Второй конец подключен к радиатору.
I have already created a vacuum in the system. All the hoses are compressed. That is, there is practically no air.
Практически нету воздуха.
Here, please, are the vacuum indicators. How is a vacuum created? It turns out that a hose with pressure is connected here. The air passes through, goes out through this tube into the outside, and captures with itself, it turns out, the air from the system. This valve opens and a vacuum is made, a vacuum is created. After that, this valve opens, which we open it little by little, which begins to add coolant to the system already.
Понемножку, который начинает, получается, уже добавлять охлаждающую жидкость в систему.
That is, now the liquid has gone, and the system is already filled with liquid. That is, there was a vacuum, it became a liquid. It will become a liquid.
То есть было вакуум, стала жидкость, станет жидкость.
What is good about this principle? The fact that the system turns out to be filled with coolant completely, without air jams. Well, there are, of course, different cooling systems, so sometimes there is an additional pumping to be done on the BMW. But in any case, in most cases, so to speak, it's like magic, which in the future. In the future, it helps not to play with the system, not to warm the engine, warm, cool, try to release the air plug. In most cases it works. It always works. That is, the system is now filled up like this. And that's it. It turns out that the readings have fallen to 0, which means that the liquid is already completely filled, and the hoses, look, they have already become as if solid, and when I press the hose, it turns out that the liquid is already returning back. In other words, the system is already full. Well, we look. So I'm going to close this tap, open it. There will be a little air there, of course, but it will already be at the very top. That is, there is a little more liquid left. The main chambers, which are located inside the engine, the stoves, which are located below or in a hidden state. They are filled with coolant completely. Well, the machine is assembled, the oil is filled, the coolant is filled, and the first start. That's it. Check the oil level, or fill the prion, Fill the air conditioning system
заполнить
and go
фреон,
ahead.
заполнить систему кондиционирования. И вперед.